have Invisalign for
nice.
one tooth, and I have a new tray this week, and I keep slurring.
It's
So, like, a great time to be on video and talking is like...
Can't even tell.
You know we're live, right? We're live.
We're live, and don't even worry.
Yes. Yeah.
I have like what's called like a fat tongue, and I can't like say words correctly, and so I have to like slow down. So you're in good company.
All right.
This is my life. This is only temporary for you. This is my life.
I don't know. I probably have a fat tongue too. That sounds like something I would be diagnosed with.
I've been called worse.
And this is exactly why I hit record before we actually start, because that is again another perfect intro.
I'm turning red now. This is obviously whatever.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for joining. Maybe I could do a couple intros. You and I have met. We both work at Code and Theory. We'll have you introduce yourself last, but I want you to get to know these two people right here. So, Mr. Delman, you want to go first? Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jon. I am, I don't even know what I do anymore. I'm a designer. Let's just call me a designer. I work on design systems. I've been doing this for a while, since 97. I've been doing this. So a while. And I've been agency. We probably know the same people, and in-house product. And now I focus on design systems. It's nice to meet you.
Yeah.
You too.
And all your gold and platinum records, apparently. So.
And my cat, who is probably going to join this repeatedly.
Nice. That's like our first cat on this show.
I like how you just toss the cat.
Yes, I love that.
And here's my cat out of here.
Yeah, we'll definitely dub in that like same sound effect that's in every movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I do that. Like, my cat always does that. It's just like, okay, no, girl, no, over here.
Always. They know when we're having meetings too. I feel like they're like, oh, meeting, time to go on the desk.
Yeah,
always happens.
So I'm Adrian, another designer. Been around since 2000. I actually don't know. It's either 2009-ish. Because I started an internship around there. It doesn't matter. But I deal within brand design systems, product design, development, marketing, kind of jack of all trades. And so, like a little of everything. But excited to be here. Or excited to meet you and be here. That's what I meant.
You are being here too at the same time.
Stop it.
Yeah, and I've worked with these two guys at MindBody back in the day. So that's how we all met and became fast friends and have stayed in touch. And as you can see, we live in the same town, so it's nice that he can come hang out.
Nice.
But yes.
Is this your actual basement, not a background?
It is. It's a real place. Yeah. We found this couch on like Craigslist and paid, I think, $40 for it. So
60.
60. We sprung for the $60 grandma couch. It's great. Yeah.
All right. So should I do an intro now?
Yeah, go for it. Tell us about yourself.
I'm Karen, head of brand strategy at Code and Theory. I have a weird background. Not maybe everybody does these days, but I lived in the UK for 15 years and worked in the music industry and ran my own agency, doing kind of everything for bands and labels. And then I went in-house to Columbia Records and ran digital there. They didn't have a digital department before that, which is wild because it was like 2011. And then went to an agency, but very much a music brand partnership agency. It was part of the Fader magazine. So they had a London office. Then I moved back to the US. I'm from here originally on the East Coast, but I moved back to the US. I moved to LA and then up to Portland, Oregon, back to London for a bit where I was head of marketing at Spotify, and then back to Portland where I jumped into agency world full throttle. So I've worked at a few different agencies in strategy, but like social, digital experience, kind of the full gamut. I guess in many ways I did that before I was in agency world with my agency. We just didn't call it strategy. So I've been at Code and Theory for 2.5 years and kind of leading the brand practice since September. So I started this role in September. I guess that's my story. Yeah. And these are real records. They're not backgrounds, but they're also really embarrassing because I don't usually do meetings up here because it's silly to have these behind me. But
I think you said they're embarrassing, so now we have to talk about them. What are those records?
There's a Rita Ora one right there, which is maybe the most embarrassing one.
Nice.
And right above her is Calvin Harris. They were an item for a bit.
Oh, let's go.
Daft Punk, Block Party, the vaccines,
Oh,
and
Nice.
do you want to
it's
make me cry? I don't understand. Daft Punk doesn't
BD,
exist anymore.
it's BDI, which is Liam Gallagher's side project from Oasis.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so that one's up there. I have a few more of lesser known UK bands, but yeah,
That's
they're
Beautiful.
That's
they're the
fun.
special ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Well, today we are talking about the experience monster. And it was really fun how we kind of dove into that a week or two ago when we were just kind of chatting about it and getting a sense of like, what is our monster? The episode we did right before this was called literally The Brand. And so it was kind of like, okay, we checked that off. Like, how can we go deeper? So what is it beyond the brand? What are some of the implications and maybe some monsters that live in that brand world? And so we kind of stumbled upon the experience monster. So maybe unpack that for me. Like how is experience or customer experience more specifically a monster? How is it something that might be a little bit terrifying for us to kind of wade into, something we might overlook, and maybe the implications of overlooking that monster?
Yeah. So when we talked about it, I think this is not necessarily my background, customer experience, CX, as the term goes. I'm very much more in like brand strategy, creative strategy. But joining Code and with all of the people I've been exposed to here, super smart people and the clients, I think it's become really apparent that that's not two different things anymore. So the brand, traditionally you think about brand as maybe Vis ID and a promise and a purpose and, a brand strategy or things like that are your guiding light. And they are your guiding light still. They still exist and they're still really important. But the experience was often like this other thing that happened. And I think the thing that I'm really excited about, and I feel sometimes a little bit late to the party on this and realizing it, but the thing that I get really excited about is that the brand is the experience, especially in a modern world. Customers don't look at, can I say brand names? Customers don't look at Nike and say, oh, Nike's a swoosh and it's just do it.
Yeah.
And then go into a store and not have any expectations. They have expectations based on what the brand has said. And we talk about it as all of your messaging and your brand and like the visual and the language is the expectation you're setting. And the experience is how you fulfill that expectation. And I think we still today are in situations with pitches and with clients where we're talking about them as two separate things that are divorceable, and they're just not. They're not two separate things. You can't have a brand without an experience because then it becomes lipstick on a pig, or maybe a beautiful pig. I don't know, but it's just lipstick on a pig at that point. You're not really delivering your brand. A brand is a behavior. It's not just the pretty stuff. The pretty stuff is important, but the pretty stuff needs to lead to something. Otherwise, you have a hollow promise. So I think that's a realization that I'm coming to maybe slowly, but it's also, I think a lot of people are like, I say that based on current experiences in lots of work where people think like, oh, put the CX at the end of the deck. And it's because CX traditionally felt like a product thing or a tech thing. And it felt like kind of a separate thing to the brand, like a thing that you bolt on. And the more you look at it, it's so fundamental to how the brand is and what the brand's value is in the world. And you see it coming when brands have problems, when they do a stupid thing, that you see it come to play there. So somebody does an ad and it's really insensitive or it's stupid or whatever, and it has a lot of backlash. That's a brand not fulfilling their expectation with their actions. But you don't often see good examples of it. Good examples of it are usually touted as great CX, but they don't talk about the brand actually delivering on the brand. And as you bring those two together, it becomes really exciting, especially for, an agency like Code, but it becomes really exciting when you're a critical thinker, a problem solver, to say like every single touch point this brand has is the brand. You don't get to have a brand by just having a tagline and a logo. The brand is everything that you do in the world. That's really challenging, but it's also really exciting because you have there's a lot more opportunity to make your brand mean something than there was in the past.
Yeah, definitely. And maybe Delman, you've worked across a lot of different ways of brand expression through your career, at least from what I've seen, like being in the agency world, going in-house to something like Mindbody, going into Wayno moving into Twitter, now doing what you're doing at Workiva, design systems, like so many different things. Like how have you seen CX maybe show up, whether it's digital, in person? Like What's the breadth of that you've noticed over the years?
I think what you said, Karen, is absolutely spot on. I think, and we see it without recognizing it. I think like a brand or a product feels aimless when there's no quote brand behind it. It's like the marketing is disconnected from product. You don't understand what are the principles, which is basically code for what are my customers expecting out of this, and it feels like two separate orgs. And my question while you were walking through that is like, how do you approach brands who haven't thought about like what is their story? Maybe at all. Maybe most brands, a lot of new ones specifically, only start with a product and they don't think like, I'm going to be a brand, I'm going to be Apple, I'm going to have some sort of like historical context. You have a feeling like, how do you approach them differently? So you have an established brand and you're like, hey, you got to live up to your expectations.
Yep.
If you are. And then you have no brand, but they're like, but we do, we have a logo. Like, how do you tell that story to them and how do you approach them differently?
Carefully. I mean, every time we have a pitch or a new business opportunity with a startup, it's that. I mean, like even very large companies that started as startups, it's product first, and they don't really think about the brand or don't care about the brand. And I think that's pretty common in the tech world. I haven't lived in the tech world, but just in my experience at Code and other agencies. But I think the reality is you have to reverse engineer it somehow. I think there's a delicate balance of creating some meaning. It's not meaning for meaning's sake. And I think sometimes like strategery, like this is my world, but you could tell a beautiful story and you could do all this stuff. And a lot of people just don't have patience for that. But I think if you kind of keep that backbone of what is the expectation that you're setting and then how are you fulfilling it, the product is the fulfillment in that case. So it's just getting whoever the owner is to say, well, what expectation are you fulfilling? And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the expectation that you need to get out in the world. That's your brand. It doesn't have to be a 75-page Viz ID book. And it could be in the future. Like the brand does help a lot of things. It builds equity in who you are and has long-term potential. But when you're a product and you're on shoestring budgets and you're trying to just make things work, or maybe not shoestring budgets, like maybe don't focus on building that 75-page brand guideline book and focus on what is the expectation that you're setting. What do you want to promise your customers? And then fulfill it with the product. And I think if you keep that in mind, you're on the road to having a solid brand. It might not be the most robust brand and it might not be the deepest and longest term brand, but it's something. And I think that's all a brand is. It's just the promise that you're making.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some brands out there that you feel like really do that? Like really show up in a way that feels true to what they're saying?
I think I knew you were going to ask me that question. And I have well, no, I mean, often this is the conversation that we're having because people, I mean, a lot of the pitches, even within the network, this is such a new way of thinking for an agency when you're used to having like, what's our TV spot? And then everything comes off of that. And this is like, oh no, that actually is the last thing. It's like, what is all the other stuff that leads you to need a TV spot? So it's pretty common now, even with our current clients. I think brands that do it well, I'm going to throw out like some favorite brands where it's like Duolingo. And full disclosure, I know the CMO. This is not why I'm picking them, but we used to work together. But I just think they've made a promise of bringing language education to the world in a really fun and engaging way. And every single time you see them anywhere, they're delivering that promise. Doesn't matter what it is, a stuffy, some sort of gamification in the app, social media activations that they do, they're bringing it to life there. I think there's a lot of, I'm not going to come up with a bunch of other examples off the top of my head, unfortunately. I think Nike do a great job at realizing their big picture ambition in all of their touch points. They've woven it through every single piece of it. And not all of it's succeeded, but I mean, nothing ever does, right? But I think they've done a really amazing job at just having this North Star and weaving it into every aspect of their experience and also using that as a filter of which experience should we have. Like, do we need to show up everywhere? Well, no, you show up in the places that's going to deliver this promise and really deliver it to consumers and get them what they need from you as a brand and as a consumer relationship. But I think it's brands that kind of exist across that. We are working on some brands where this thinking is in play, and it's really exciting to see it form from blank. It's like exciting to build it from nothing. We're working on a brand right now who exist, but they are going through a full brand transformation, fully top to bottom. And I think it's really exciting to see that come into play where you're defining the brand, where the brand lives, how the brand should make money, how the brand should sell and communicate every aspect of it. It's rare to get an opportunity to do that, but we're lucky to have that. And I think being able to see that from the ground up is exciting. I think we're often having to reverse engineer it. To your point, John, like this is not an easy conversation or an easy mind shift. And a lot of companies still have like a marketing and an experience C-suite. They have two different people who aren't necessarily with the same priorities, or a brand one. So it's often a difficult discussion to have, but we have it often in the idea that it's all about connecting everything. And you can do it light touch, where it's like connecting your ecosystem, which is a really easy way to say it. But if you say your North Star, if you have it as a brand, is this. So how does your CRM deliver that? How does your retail experience deliver that? How does all of that? That's all CX. And I think getting people to understand that definition of CX is probably the first barrier, because that's not what it means to a lot of people. So once you get there and you're like, every single place is CX, then that makes your brand. That's more important than anything else, because if you have a beautiful logo and you have all these promises and you don't deliver them in store, that's where brands fall down and they lose value. So I think those are probably the two brands that I would select as ones that off the top of my head show up in that way. Another one, and I'm saying this loosely because I don't know if I fully have delved into their ecosystem, but I think Peloton does a pretty good job of this. Like their product integration, their communication, their mission, it really drives everything that they're trying to do, which is, I don't know what their actual mission is, but like bringing fitness into the home, making it more accessible, and bringing a community element to it. And I think everything they do has that to it, everything that I've seen them do. So I think it's really being driven by that North Star. And you can see like why they wouldn't do certain things and why they would do certain things. It's very obvious once you do that, and it makes sense. And once a brand makes sense to people, they start to really believe that the brand is something, because it starts to make sense. If something doesn't make sense, you're kind of confused by it. Nobody wants your brand to be confusing.
I have a follow-up on that, because you talked a lot about consumer brands. How does that change in enterprise brands, where if you and I aren't making those decisions, we aren't going, well, this is how I feel about Atlassian, or I like or dislike Jira. The company is making that decision a lot of times. Do you think brand strategy still has a place in that world, an impact in that? Or is it the product is the product, and it starts to get into like, does it do the thing I need, but I didn't make the choice? Like the consumer, I make the choice, but in the enterprise, I usually get thrust that choice.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Code and Theory has just won Best B2B Agency. You cut that out. But we work on a lot of B2B brands. Almost, I would say probably on the brand team, it's probably like 75% of our brands are B2B. And the joke saying that comes up in every meeting is like brands or companies are people too. They have people, they have feelings. And you're like, do they? But they do. And there is a customer at the end, and there's wildly different decision-making processes and timelines and stakeholders and all of that. That's the challenge of working on it. But ultimately, it's still people making decisions on their needs and what do they need to do their job well. So when we do work on that, and I'm thinking of a brand that we worked on right when I started, actually, a few years ago. So it was an ad tech brand, not enterprise necessarily, though, a B2B brand, but their whole thing was, there's so much competition. How do they differentiate? And that's all brand strategy is. How are you differentiating? So it was a brand transformation, again, a brand strategy and Viz ID and a little bit of a website. But they needed to differentiate, and they needed to find something that was meaningful in differentiation, so they could go out with their sales teams and enablement tools that really cut through. When we talk about the experience, that still was super important. It dictated how the brand needed to behave when they went to sales conferences. It dictated how they needed to behave in their sales enablement material. How are they talking about their services? And their whole thing was about simplicity. So it meant their sales enablement materials, we needed to distill really weird, complex jargon down into simplicity, not because the client or the customer couldn't understand it, but because we were promising simplicity with depth underneath. So everything had this, we needed to add a layer of simplicity so that it was really easy to grasp the value prop immediately. And then when we talked about activations, everything needed to be about simplicity and elevation. How are we elevating this moment? How are we bringing simplicity and elevation to the fore? So I think it's just as important. It's just that the makeup of the audience, the decision-making, all of those things are just a lot different. But you're still going through the same process of differentiation, find the differentiation, make a promise about it, and then deliver on that promise.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And we talked a little bit about, I think it was functional versus emotional experience, and how that might need to show up in one way or another, depending on the circumstances. So I don't know if you remember that when we were talking last time.
I don't.
But
I think you graciously said a few weeks ago, but I think it was more like a month ago.
Yeah, it probably was. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know if that brings up anything for you, but I do remember there was a moment where we talked about that, and I never thought about it that way. Like, there's a functional experience and there's an emotional experience. And it seems like, oh yeah, totally. But when you think about, again, the experience monster, a lot of times what happens with these monsters of design that we talk about, we oversimplify them and they become scary. And I think when we're able to break them apart and unpack it a little bit more, that's when they're not as scary. And in some ways they're actually very exciting to embrace and work with. And so that was something that really helped me, because even in the work that I'm doing, and, you know, for me, a lot of it is making that promise, whether it's through like content, video, photo, animation, whatever, you're making those promises, right? But I have to know what's going to happen on the other end. Is it something that's functional, a how-to video, right? Or if it's emotional, where it's like, when you use this brand, it's going to make an impact on your life, you know? And so, yeah, how's that shown up for you throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny working in music because it's all that.
Yeah,
there's almost
totally.
There's almost no brain. There's no functional in it.
Yeah.
It's all emotional. But I think in strategy, like everybody just talks about, strategy is all about putting this consumer at the center. Like that's just old hat. It's what we do. But this kind of changes it and pulls a sharp focus on that. And it means that you need different things at different times. We always talk about the consumer journey isn't linear, because nobody like goes through, I am finding awareness. I am starting to consider these products. You go, it's like this, depending on what you're buying, it could be this wild 6-month journey. It could be an impulse purchase. And different products have different, you know, nobody's doing that for toilet paper. You're not spending that long, hopefully, deciding on what toilet paper to buy. But I think when you go back to functional and emotional, obviously everything needs to work. Like it needs to do the thing that you promised it would do functionally. But the emotional element is where you start to elevate what your brand can mean to someone. So it can do a job. And I don't remember which brand we were talking about, but when you purely focus on functional, that is an easy way to make yourself obsolete quickly because anybody can copy functionality. There's very little that's like proprietary in the world, or can't be copied or mimicked or something. So I think the emotional layer is starting, the emotional experience starts to add something that is truly differentiating, is truly your message, is truly your brand. It's where the brand personality comes out. That being said, like emotional experience or like cool stuff for the sake of it is pointless. And I think that's where we come from is like, what is the problem that this audience needs to solve right now? Even at the most granular level. Like I'm walking into a store, it's super busy. I hate going to busy stores. What's the problem? There's probably 10 problems there we can solve. What are the problems we can solve? How do we want them to feel when we solve it? And I think thinking about those two things, otherwise you just have like flash in the pan or like self-declared obsolescence. So you kind of need the combination of the two at every moment. It's like, what do we want them to do? And how do we want them to feel? And I think if you can bring those together, that is an experience moment. Not every moment needs to do that, but I often think about, we did a whole piece on the power of friction. And I have this, again, coming from music, the idea that friction is something to be embraced, removing friction. Like friction is what humanity is. We're built on friction. We're built on like the pain of learning to ride a bike. That's how you learn. The pain of going to a record store and looking for the record that you want, not getting it for 3 weeks in a row, but the excitement on the 4th week when you get it. And I think that friction is what makes human experience. So we've gone to this place of like frictionless. And frictionless in some cases is great. But frictionless when it's a painful experience is great. Friction when it's an enjoyable experience or a human experience, I think you should actually elevate that and find ways to enhance the friction and make it more human and make it more tangible, even if it's digital. And that comes back to it. It's like, how do you elevate these moments of friction? And I'm stealing this from an old agency. I don't think they use it anymore, but turn those friction moments into magic. But ultimately, it's like, how do you neutralize the friction? Or how do you make the friction an actual feature instead of a bug? How do you make this a moment where you can really enjoy the experience and give people something? And that's the emotional part. Like the friction part is the functional. and the turning it to magic is the emotional part. And if you can do that throughout the journey, you create not only like solve every single problem, but you create a really strong emotional connection with the brand and the business and the product that kind of hopefully keeps them coming back.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I love that. The concept of friction. That's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's fun when you get into the thinking about what that looks like in different places. And thinking, I mean, I worked at Spotify, so I think it's a great product, but it's also in so many ways made my love of music very surface level because I never get a deep cut in my shuffle.
Yeah.
And so like I'm only listening to the top tracks by every artist I like, which I know and I'm bored of now. I want the deep cuts, and Spotify's never going to serve me the deep cuts. My iPod on shuffle will.
Yeah.
And that's like, so there's a bit of friction in that where you're still going through and you're still discovering, you're still listening. And I feel like Spotify has made me very dull. I think Discover Week, there's so many good things about Spotify, but I think just streaming music, not Spotify, streaming music has made so much of the discovery process, the intellectual, the emotional connection with music so flat. And I would love it if somebody tried to add some friction back into it.
Yeah.
Add some work back into it so I could feel like it's my experience. It's not just this universal experience anybody could have.
Totally. That's cool.
I feel like Spotify tried to do that recently with the AI DJ. And what I found was an honesty that I wasn't ready for the deep cut, right? Like I was like, I want to know more. I was exactly in your boat. I was like, I'm bored with this. And then it's like, let me serve you up new stuff. I was like, not new stuff. This must suck, right? And I want to ask, like, is that sort of like we want the friction, but we don't want the friction in brands? Is it something that you deal with of like people are like, hey, like Apple generated for years that friction, it's going to happen moment, and they would have a keynote. Figma's captured that magic as well of like, hey, we're going to do this thing that you've all been complaining about. And like, that's the friction, right? Of like delivering a calculator to iPad, even though you could have done it a decade ago. Like, and everyone's like, yay, calculator, which is so silly. But how do you talk to a brand and say like, this thing is friction, but it's an opportunity instead of what brands usually do is like ignore it, like Instagram not having an iPad, interface, or Strava not having an iPad interface. It's an opportunity. I always feel like, how do you inject that into their brand if their brand is really like deliver the thing, not listen to the people? Kind of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, there's like pain, like I know you're not asking logistically, but the painful process of like strategic justification. So like, make a business case for it. But I know that's not what you mean. I think when I think about friction, I just think about like, when do you want your customer to slow down? Like when do you want them to speed up a lot of the time? You want them to be super efficient and not have to spend time with you. When do you actually want them to spend time with you? That might not be in a purchase flow. It might be in content. It might be in retail. There might be something. So it's like, when do you want them to slow down and spend more time with you? And how are you getting them to do that in a way that works for them? And so like, I don't have any specific comments on the DJ function, but like maybe that wasn't the way that people wanted to slow down. And maybe that was like, I find that creepy, but also I have a 10-year-old. So my DJ set is always unhinged. But I think it's like that slowing down moment, but sometimes there is a moment, and we were working with a EV company. And there's moments that are friction moments that are just not being leveraged, that the brand can't make effortless. So the charging moment. If you have an EV, you have to charge, and it takes X amount of time depending on what model car you have. That is a friction moment. Maybe at home, it's not a friction moment because you just go in your house. But if you're on the road, it's a friction moment. So they have to slow down anyway. How can you make it better for them? What could you do to show up in that moment? So sometimes you don't have to create the friction. Sometimes there are friction moments anyway in your brand. And instead of just saying, let's make the charge time slower, where you'll never get down to zero, there's always going to be a charge time. Instead of focusing on making it slower, how do you make it better for the customer? So when I think about it, it's like not all the friction moments that people have created are maybe the right ones. And I'm not the arbiter of what's right or wrong, but like maybe if they haven't worked, it's because that's not where the customer wanted to slow down or where they were, like in terms of meeting them where they are. But I can imagine, Apple Store, I don't know their retail strategy, but the Apple Store has a slow down moment. like the way that it's laid out and merchandised and everything, and you can play with everything, even if it's slowed down for like a minute. I rarely go into the Apple store and leave within 2 minutes, even though I could, because I could just pay for something on my phone. I usually like noodle with a thing, and I go and look if there's any new cases or whatever. And you go in there and you're slowing down, and they've designed their retail experience around that. And I think that's kind of what I mean, is bringing that, what's that slow moment that you want, or the slow moments that you want.
Well, I know we're kind of coming towards the end. It's a nice tight episode, but before we do that, we got a few more minutes.
Yeah.
What we always do at the end is talk about our favorite monsters. And
Okay.
I probably didn't prepare you ahead of time for that, but it could be off the top of your head. I don't mind going first. I got one in mind. I don't know if the two of you maybe can give you a second, kind of stew on it for a minute, but
yeah, I'm stewing.
Delman, Adrian, do you have one off the top of your head?
I mean, I don't want to go too dark, but my monster right
All right,
now is love.
Let's get dark together. Love. Wow.
You know what I'm going through.
Yes.
So it's just like love.
Adrian's going through some tough stuff.
That's why I didn't really speak this much at all. So sorry about that, Karen.
It's all good. It's all good.
You're good. You're good. Your presence was uplifting.
Just kind of here at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one thing though that I did want to say though is just make something exist and then make it good.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like if you can get in front of people, brand or otherwise, that's great. And if it doesn't resonate, or it does resonate with a certain people, boom, you build off of that. But yeah, I apologize for not speaking too much today.
Good.
But yeah, my monster is love today.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's cool. And and you know, like a lot of these podcasts too, like we are like going and we talk about you know, some really interesting and insightful stuff. And I think it's cool. Like sometimes we are a little bit more vulnerable on these shows too. And if anything, the theme for this, like the customer experience, like meeting people where they're at and creating these experiences, realizing like people aren't just like going through their day, like experiencing a brand. Like we all have so much, whether it's like super awesome, happy times, low times, or stressed or whatever. That's so important for creating these experiences. So in a way, it's like every monster that we kind of talk about in some ways is like misunderstood. And so sometimes like love can be like a heavy thing. So it's really interesting. Yeah.
I don't want to dismiss the love monster or the vulnerability, but I also can I add a few comments to what you said?
Please. Yeah.
Please.
I think the make something and then make it better is a really, really crucial point in the world. Like, especially with the low barrier of entry of technology, how possible it is to make things, and how low risk it is, especially as a new brand, how low risk it is to put something out in the market and iterate and evolve it.
Yes.
I like the focus on getting it perfect instead of getting it done. I know somebody famous said that, maybe Steve Jobs. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like that is one of the most infuriating things when you like, I'm not a maker, but I like to noodle on things, but I think just get it done and then do it. And I have like a perfectionist streak. So I'll be like, no, it has to be perfect. And then you remember that nothing's ever going to be perfect. I'm never going to be happy with anything. So if you just get it out and you actually build it for that, is really important. And then John, you just said something that made me want to say something else, and I don't remember what it was. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no worries. Do you have a monster in mind?
I want one of you to go first before I go.
I'll go.
Tell me.
So I've been cycling through Studio Ghibli stuff a lot. My son's getting into that again. And what I've learned in a lot of them is the children a lot of times are the central characters, and the monsters themselves are misunderstood. And so what we've been watching a lot is Totoro. And Totoro, for all intents and purposes, is a monster. It's a ginormous thing that lives in a tree with a bunch of other little things that live on top of him. But it's a gentle monster, right? Like if you and I saw this monster, we'd be terrified. Especially that cat bus shows up and you climb inside, gross. That would terrify me. But the kids in there are comfortable with that. And I'm really drawn to like misunderstood monsters. That being monstrous is a behavior and not an object of a monster. Watch Monsters, Inc. That they're not, I mean, they start off scary, but obviously not. And I kind of love that concept of the label versus the action. And so Studio Ghibli's really been hitting that home for me.
That's cool.
Yeah. I was actually going to do a similar one, and now I feel like I'm copying you. But there's a cartoon called Hilda, and a book series.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really sweet and adorable. And Grimes does the soundtrack for it, I think.
Nice.
But there's a bunch of monsters in it, and like fantastic beasts and things. But there's wolves that are like puffballs that fly, and trolls, and they live in Trollberg. There's lots of trolls. Everyone's terrified of the trolls. Hilda is this I don't know, daring girl that goes out and isn't that afraid of them and just wants to draw them. And you realize that most of the trolls are, or the troll that tries to attack her, it tries to attack her because it has like a toothache or something. It's that kind of trope. And they tie a bell to its nose because they hate bells. And but she wants to get alerted when the troll comes up, and the bell starts ringing because the troll's moving. So they're freaking out. And then she bravely just goes over and she realizes the troll's in pain. And I think that I think those presentations of monsters, especially being a parent, is like, it's good to remind yourself that your kids aren't always monsters. They're just acting that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just that presentation is a really sweet one and it also helped. I mean, my daughter's been watching it for a long time, but it also helped her kind of shift her perception of like good and bad.
Yeah.
And be able to like see the gray area between them. So
totally. That's cool. Mine is not as deep. It's probably the least deep out of all yours. Around this time of year where we live, spring, it's always like March. I feel like March hits. Where we live in Cambria, it's kind of rural, small town. And there are a lot of wild turkeys where we live. And so much so that sometimes there's an empty lot next door to where we live. And I'll see like 20 to 30 out there. It's crazy. And, you know, they're very safe here. There's not really any predators. You can't like hunt out here. And at our old house, I have this picture of, it's like literally the Jurassic Park picture of a turkey, like making me not want to get out of my car that I took from like the side mirror, you know? And it literally, like, they're dinosaurs. Like, they are terrifying. I still remember that moment. It hasn't happened since, but tried to get out of my car, and it just like these are the big like jakes, you know, like the big beard and like big wings, like scraping them on the ground. And it was like coming towards me fast. And I'm like, I'm just going to stay in my car for a few minutes.
Kick them in the head. It's all good.
There was a lot of them, man.
You kick them all in the
like
head.
one
It's
flew
pecking
up,
order.
landed on my car. No joke. Like they were bullying me.
you were on turkey safari.
Dude,
You should
serious.
start selling tickets for a turkey safari in Cambria.
Yeah. It's honestly, that's a good idea.
Hey.
So
Have
your
you
monster
seen-
is
are
a
they-
turkey.
are they around your
Is that
place?
what we're going with? That your monster this week is
A turkey. My monster is a turkey.
I'll second that. They're monsters. They're beasts. They're
They
all over
are
this
monsters,
neighborhood,
but
too. They make me stop the car all the time. They just laissez-faire walking across the street.
Yeah.
And you're like,
See,
you're not going to hit me.
I love it.
Hit me.
I love it though, because every time I see a little school or whatever they are, a little flock of little turkeys, I will stop the car and I will just go. I won't do it in mic, but I'll go like I will do that, and they will respond back.
They do. They talk,
and then I'll just keep going, and then I'm just entertained.
I believe it's gaggle. Isn't it gaggle?
Gaggle.
Isn't that correct?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
Or is that geese?
That's
I don't know.
geese. But it might be a double,
geese
a double
suck.
time thing.
I thought turkeys gobble.
Geese suck.
Gobble.
No. Like, is it
And a group
is it
of
a
geese
flock?
is a gaggle, right?
It's a gaggle. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Geese. Those
The turkeys,
things are scary.
it's like a gang. I think it's a gang. That's
A
their
gang
It's a
gang.
of
rafter.
turkeys.
It's a rafter.
Yes,
It's
they
a
are
rafter.
raptors with feathers.
No, it's the collective noun is a rafter.
Oh.
R-A-F-T-R.
A rafter.
Mhm.
Wow.
Cool.
I had
The
no
only
idea.
one
Almost
that I
as cool as
know
crows,
is
but
murder
cool.
murder of crows, right? Yeah.
Murder of crows. Just the
No,
best.
thank you.
Yeah.
I remembered. I know we're done, but I remembered
it's
the
all
other thing
good.
I was going to say, and it was what John, when you said like you did your robot walk of humanity, and it was coming back to the consumer experience or the customer experience. And we always talk about data in the industry, every industry, and I think a lot of the time the way that we've tried to like homogenize groups of people or like talk to them for scale and efficiency, talk to them like that. The reality is we're in this age now where there is a person at the end of each piece of data, and there is a behavior and there is something there. And I think the force factor here is you have to start looking at people as individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really challenging for brands.
Yeah.
Technology lets you do it, but there is a leap there that has to happen because brands, advertising, everyone is so used to talking to like mass groups of people. And I think when you did the robot walk, I was just thinking like people do talk about people like that. Consumers do this and they go through this funnel and they do this thing. And there is no such thing as consumers. Like that doesn't really exist. And of course, we'll still use that word. We have to. But I think the other piece of customer experience that is delivering the promise is very individual to each person. And that is a real challenge for brands. And I know this probably opens up a whole other can of worms, but I just wanted to mention that part, that the data piece it's really important to rehumanize data as you go into this new era of customer experience.
Yeah.
I know we're close to time, if not over. I just wanted to ask this because I think you mentioned a lot about going into stores and physically interacting, and that's obviously, it's get this kind of diminished, obviously, with a pandemic, and then it's sort of got a reemergence when we realize we need to be around other human beings. How do you talk to brands that like their only interaction is typically through Amazon, right? Like a consumer only interacts with this brand through another vehicle.
Yeah.
Like Instacart, for example, like where I'm not making the choices on the groceries, the buyer is making that choice for me. How do you talk to brands about how their brand strategy might play out in that world?
I don't know an example of a brand that only does that. But I would say, I mean, we work with Amazon ads. So there's still opportunities for you to like, in any of those places, promote your brand and make those promises. But I think, coming back down to it, being really creative about those touch points. The touch points are the product, like whatever the product is, you can use that. There's still conversation happening around your product online, maybe in real life, but it's harnessing the customers and the fans, if you will, of your product, your brand, understanding what they need. And then, I mean, I don't have the answer for how to facilitate that on Amazon or Instacart, but I think going back to that fundamental, who's my audience? What do they need? What problems do they need to be solving? Let's make that promise and deliver the promise. And then that becomes part of a roadmap. If Instacart or Amazon can't deliver that promise, then maybe in the future you have to branch out. It becomes kind of a forcing factor there that isn't, it's dictating where you need to go because you can't deliver your promise in your current ecosystem.
That's great. Yeah. That's kind of the perfect way to end it on delivering a promise. I love it.
Delivering a promise.
Well, Karen, thank you so much for doing this. I know you got a busy schedule, so, it means a lot.
We had to reschedule this like 18 times, so sorry about that.
Yep. All of us, we all have
same.
So many things going on. So it's, we're all in it together. But I hope it's the first of many conversations, and thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It was great to meet you all. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Thank you.